When I opened at Smallman Galley, I wasn't sure. I mean, just like any business owner in the world, you open a business, you put yourself out there, and you're not sure what's going to happen. So I saw it as, hey, this is my business. We're probably going to be a pizza shop.
Right.
Just in case Pittsburgh doesn't gravitate towards Detroit-style pizza, we could do pasta or
you get a backup plan.
Cheeseburger. Right. So I opened with this hilarious menu for a pizza shop, and then one weekend we knew that
And then you quickly cut it back. Yeah. This is Pittsburgh, a place where a rich heritage of making things and a fierce independent nature come together to create a thriving entrepreneurial community. Whether you're a small business owner looking for ideas or inspiration, or you're an enthusiastic supporter of local businesses, you'll find it here. I'm your host, Darin Vilano, and this is the Proprietors of Pittsburgh podcast. Hey everyone, today I'm with my guest, Pete Tolman. He is the owner of Ironborn Pizza here in Pittsburgh. Thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate it, Pete.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So for the uninitiated out there who aren't as familiar with Detroit-style pizza, and that's primarily the main type of pizza. That's the concept, right?
That's definitely what we're known for.
Okay, so for those out there who, the uninitiated, as I like to call them, that may be less familiar with it, although I know it's gaining in popularity, could you describe what is Detroit-style pizza? What constitutes Detroit-style pizza? How is it different than, say, the mainstream pizza that we grew up with and that we all have come to know and love? What makes it different?
So Detroit-style pizza is usually a pan-style pizza that's about 1 inch to 1.5 inches high. There's often a crispy crust layer around the outside that makes it like really exciting, kind of like a Cheez-It. It's like this little snap and salty bit.
Yeah.
Oftentimes people use brick cheese. That's a common thing for Detroit-style pizza. We don't necessarily use that. We use a mozzarella provolone blend, but that's because that's what Pittsburghers enjoy quite a bit. Classic Detroit-style pizza was made in these pass trays, I would call them, from like Detroit auto body building. In the process, they would pass nuts and bolts through these trays.
Okay, so they were like repurposed trays then?
Exactly.
Are they thick on the side to accommodate the thicker? They're like have a pan kind of shape to them?
Yeah, there's sharp angles, so at the corners you get these crispy crust little cheddar things, and then they're shaped so that as the dough rises it gets nice and light, and then as you bake it, it's super crispy on the bottom. So there's these like 2 layers of separation, really crispy on bottom, light on top. But then we add the sauce at the end.
And you had the sauce on top.
Right. And it
so
looks a little weird.
Sauce is on top of the cheese?
Yes.
Yeah, that is unusual. Because people might go, where's this? Anybody ask you where the cheese is?
No.
They can figure it out. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's also read, I think, that you ferment. Is it you're fermenting the dough for 48 hours? Is that part also of what makes it Detroit style? Is that what makes it rise higher to a thicker or?
That does help with fermentation and getting a better rise and a better overall product. The reason we do a 48-hour ferment is so that, one, we can do it properly in a chilled environment, and it lets kind of like marries all those flavors together. The yeast starts breaking down the flour and the sugars and creating those bubbles that you want. But the reason we do it is to try to get as much flavor and as much fermentation and like that yeasty, bready, delicious flavor you want.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
If you would mix pizza dough in an hour and then make it, sure, it's going to be good. You got to let it rest, but if you let it sit for a while, it's going to get really, really good.
You're taking it to the next level. And are you using those pans that are similar to what the original Detroit style was? Obviously, you're probably they're probably a little different, right? But is it a similar concept there?
No, you're totally right. That's a good point. So originally, Buddy's is known for using blue steel pans. They're hard to find these days. Not a lot of people are producing custom blue steel pans. They do exist. Buddy still uses them. We use an aluminum type. It's a little bit easier, a little bit more modernized. I don't have to scrape them every night or re-oil or re-season. But yeah, we have hundreds of the exact same Detroit style pizza pans.
So for those listening, you mentioned Buddy's. Who's Buddy's and what do they do?
Buddy's is considered one of the big dogs of Detroit. There's Cloverleaf, Buddy's, Detroit style pizza company.
So this is a company that is part of that quintessential Detroit-style pizza pioneer, making that style well-known in that area, that part of the country then. And where a lot of this is emanating from then.
Yeah, if you're in Detroit, and you're going to get pizza. It's probably Buddy's or Cloverleaf is probably going to come up.
Okay. And so tell me about how you discovered Detroit-style pizza. What was the story behind how it came about for you, and why then, after you discovered it, why did you choose it for your concept?
I took a trip to Colorado with my girlfriend at the time, Telluride, Colorado, and the people that we were staying at, their home, had recommended this pizza place. It's called Brown Dog Pizza in Telluride, Colorado. I, to be honest, was a little like, hey, I love pizza. I mean, I do love pizza, but I was kind of like, they told me about Detroit-style pizza, and I found that fascinating because just
have you ever heard of it? Probably never heard of it, right?
Right. And I'd been cooking for 10 or 12
How many years ago? How many years ago was this?
This would be 3.5 years ago.
Okay.
Now.
Okay.
So, it was about 1 year before we opened our first spot.
Okay.
So we go to this little pizza shop, Detroit, Michigan stuff everywhere. It's, really cool space. We're having fun. Then we order the pizzas that they recommend, and the chef there, the pizziola there, has actually won like World Pizza Championships, so you could see it on the menu that this guy knew what he was talking about. And then they delivered the pizza, and I was just sitting there like confused, looking around the table like, am I the only one experiencing this? So I remember sitting there and being like, I don't understand why Pittsburgh doesn't have this pizza. How do we not know about it?
So at the time, no one in Pittsburgh was really doing this.
At that time, yeah.
Was this a Detroit family out there in Colorado? Did you know?
Jeff Smokovich grew up in. We actually get along. We're friends now. We text or whatever. But he grew up in Detroit. He played football for University of Michigan, and then he transplanted out to Colorado and then opened his shop. So now he has Brown Dog Pizza and Blue Pan Pizza in Denver. So you can get it. He has 2 different shops in 2 different cities.
So you fell in love with that pizza. Obviously, you liked it a lot.
I loved it.
And you came home and said, and what made it the center of your concept was you wanted to bring something new to Pittsburgh. Yeah,
absolutely. I saw a gap in the market, and I kind of attacked it a little bit. But, I mean, I spent about a year working on that recipe, made phone calls, texted people, lots of trial and error, and then took a leap and tried to go for it.
That's what I was going to ask you next was, you found the pizza, you came across it, you enjoyed it, you fell in love with it, you decided to make this a concept, it all came together. So how did you learn to make Detroit-style pizza? Was it a combination of just doing research, experimenting? Did you hire somebody or consult with somebody? Did somebody help you out? Because it may not just be automatic, right? You tried it and you probably could figure some things out, but how did you come up with your version of it?
Well, I was classically trained. I went to IUP Culinary Academy in Punxsutawney, and I had been in fine dining for many years. So just through that time, you learn to work with doughs, you learn to work with yeast doughs. So I had a general basis or a major structure on how to make pizza. And if you think about pizza dough as a baker instead of not necessarily a pizza maker, but if you think about it really in depth, you can start to figure out how to change the yeast levels or the fermentation levels. And
so you kind of reverse engineered it. Your mind was spinning a little bit trying to figure out, okay, wait a minute, how can I'm eating this pizza, I'm seeing what the dough is like, and you start to you're going through the process in your head of how do you get the bread that high, and you start to figure that out. And then did you get in the kitchen and play with it? Did it take a little time to nail it down? Did you do a little reading up on it on dough and try to figure that out?
I read every single pizza book that I could find. A lot of good ones out there. Tons of trial and error, tons of notes. I was making pizza at least once a week, if not more. Put on about 30 pounds.
There you go.
I've lost it. I've lost it.
Good. There's the experimentation coming in right there.
Yeah, me and my fiance ate a lot of pizza for a long time. Then I started quietly like, hey, remember how we went to Colorado? Like, this is my take on it. So, like, I made it for that family.
Okay.
How do you guys feel about it?
Were you making it in your kitchen at home then? Because you didn't have a commercial kitchen yet, right? So you were just testing. Were you testing out on friends and family?
Yeah, exactly. Friends, family.
You're getting some good
feedback.
Getting pretty good feedback.
Yeah, it was really good.
Is the product today look different, better than what you were working with in the kitchen back then?
Absolutely.
What's been the reaction of the friends and family that were the earliest trier? You mentioned your fiance, but the people that tried it, how did they react when you first opened? Did they say, wow, you come a long way?
Yeah, we came a long way in that first month or so, but we were also selling out like every night almost.
You're like,
so
sorry, friends and family. We're like, we can't give no pizza for the family. I can't bring home any tonight because we're just selling out.
Yeah, so we couldn't keep up with demand, and then as a business is struggling to get its wheels going,
right.
It's even harder for us to walk in every day and like, we're 2 days behind on where we want to be, and the day hasn't even started.
Wow.
So
you knew you were onto something
then. Deflating.
You knew you were onto something.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Right. But if you sell out or like you're just out of product, that's a terrible thing for a business. So we wanted to make sure that
you don't want to be too short. You don't want to be nothing wrong with creating a little bit of urgency, but you don't want to be sell it so quickly that you can't serve the demand.
Yeah, so I was terrified we were going to upset a lot of people.
Yeah, you don't want to make people
And I'm
mad.
not a person that would ever want to, short people.
Right,
we're
of
in
course.
the service industry, so that's what we're here to do, is to take care of the guests. But
so it was a process of experimentation. It was a process of, did you need to consult with anybody? You had enough skills as a culinary person to pretty much do it on your own?
I would say that.
Yeah, just kind of.
Tons of questions, even today.
Well, that's a good point right there. So tell me about that. So you obviously found some friends in the business that are willing to talk to you, and you probably do the same to others. What's the culture like in pizza across the country? I mean, are people helping one another?
Yeah.
I mean, I really like that. I think that it's not just pizza, but lots of different types of businesses. People are helping one another.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the culture these days more than in the old days. Our parents, grandparents' generation, people were a little tight with secrets. The old famous kernels chicken recipe or whatever. People kept it pretty tight, right? You think of all these famous recipes. Coke's famous recipe, that was always the thing. But I find today people are much more willing to be open and share. You obviously found that then with people. Tell me about how that experience worked for you. Did people pretty open with sharing thoughts with you?
Yeah, it's been a really great experience. So in the process of trying to learn this pizza dough recipe, I was still in the work at Giant Eagle. I was an executive chef for the Giant Eagle chain.
Okay.
So that's where I learned kind of how to manage and how a P&L works and things like that. But when I was at Giant Eagle, kind of working on the process and at home, I had called Tony Gemignani, who's a famous...
very famous.
Very famous.
Even I know that name,
exactly.
and I'm not even in the pizza business.
So I emailed Tony.
And he responded?
He responded.
That's awesome.
And
cool.
I remember the email was kind of like, hey, I'm in Italy. I'll call you on this date. And I wrote, some notes. I was trying to figure out the perfect hydration, how far to push it, how far you can't push it. The more water you add to a dough, the harder it becomes to work with. Stuff like that. So when I was seriously considering opening the business, I kind of called Tony like, hey, how do you manage this? How are you able to produce this much dough? Things like that. And he called me back, told me everything that I ever could have, answered every question I could have asked. And then after we got into the process of majorly into the process and had kind of a track record going, Kevin Kahn, Michael Mercurio, some of the other guys in the city, Nick from Caliente, they go to Vegas every year.
Right, to the Pizza Expo or one of the big events? Okay.
Yep. So you get to meet all these people. That's where I see Jeff from Colorado. You get to see people from the city, and everybody's talking about pizza, what flour you use.
You're there for it, so people are really into having the conversation, yeah.
So after that phone call from Tony and meeting Jeff Smokovich, who they're friends, they're actually on the World Pizza Champions team. I don't know if Nick had mentioned that. So I'm one of the newer members with Nick from Caliente.
Okay.
And then there's this group of amazing pizza makers from all over the city, or all over the United States.
Right.
And, we're all texting each other almost every day.
That's great.
They're
so you got a network
to compete in Parma, Italy in April. So, we have this major network.
That's awesome.
And nobody really hides anything. It's great.
That's awesome. So you mentioned your culinary background, too. You talked about places you've worked at. What lessons from your culinary background? You probably worked for different restaurants. You went to school, as you mentioned. You worked at Giant Eagle. What lessons from your culinary background have you learned that help play into what you're doing here as a business owner and as a pizzeria owner?
I think it's important as a young cook to try to find different chefs or mentors, let's call it, that you kind of spend some time with and really learn how to do the things that are important to make good food, how to learn the base recipes, how to organize yourself, your daily tasks. And then as you spend time with those chefs, they're going to give you more responsibility. So I spent a lot of time in fine dining until it wore me out. And then I went into management with Giant Eagle, and that's where I learned how to effectively manage people.
How to run.
Yeah.
So you learned all the aspect, people,
Yeah.
the food, the craft, the chef aspect, as well as the operating aspect. So you felt like you had all the pieces coming into this pretty much then.
I felt like I had a nice base.
Okay.
I felt like I could do it if we had a nice track record. A lot of that's building a great team. So I have a ton of people with very similar backgrounds that have worked their way up. And then it's like, okay, we all know how to cook. What can we make that people are going to gravitate towards and really enjoy? And that's what we try to do every day.
So we're right here in your second location in the Strip District. And some people say that are in the food business that the second location is always the hardest, because when you have the first location, you're hands-on, you're there, you can be there as much as you need to be, you're in control of the process. Most first-time owners and one location owners are really involved. When you get to that second location, now you got to start thinking differently, because now you got to think about processes, you got to think about management. What has been the biggest challenges for you as you've prepared to open?
Yeah, it is kind of a totally different outlook. So we opened our small shop in Millvale, and it was kind of the same thing where you organize, you set your processes. Over the past couple of months, we set up a management team, so I have 2 managers there. I have a general manager with me that I'm able to delegate to, and then she's able to delegate to them. There are growing pains from time to time, missed orders or things like that. Those are small hiccups in the grand scheme of things. But on the ownership side of the second one, it's financial weight, let's call it.
More of a burden, because
Construction
and this is
burdens.
bigger too.
Right.
And your menu, although primarily the same, is a bit different too. It's more expanded here.
Yes.
So that's going to be extra work for you, right, to manage that.
Right. So we're coming out with a new pasta concept that's all made by hand. We do make everything that we can in-house.
Yeah.
All of our pickled goods, all of our banana peppers are made in-house. But this pasta program, we hope it will be the excitement to match the excitement of the pizza, so that we can kind of show that, hey, we do know more than just Detroit-style pizza, and hopefully you guys
You're
will
going to expand the repertoire and get into
Yeah.
other types of related
Yep.
foods that can show your customer base what else you can do.
And then again, to go back to my team and my chefs, we have 2 or 3 people that love pasta. They've been making it fresh.
That's great.
You know, it should be a home run.
So the 2 locations you have, the first one was Millvale. The second one here is Strip District. Can you tell me a little bit about what went into choosing these 2 locations and these 2 different geographies here in Pittsburgh? Obviously, where we're sitting right here in the Strip District, there's a lot of change going on for the better.
Yes.
You have a lot of development, and you're kind of right in the middle of it. Was that part of it? Is there a reason you wanted to be here, and why Millvale first? Could you tell me a little bit about the backstory on that?
Millvale, we kind of just fell in love with. It's a small little tiny town where I grew up in Gataning, Pennsylvania, and it's kind of like this small little tiny drag, and then all these little shops, and there's just 2 little main streets. And
So it reminded you a lot of home.
Yeah, it did. And then the space made sense for us at the time, the lease. It was a previous restaurant, so we saw it as a way to build it out for, let's call it not a minimal amount or a small investment compared to some restaurants. The goal of Millvale is to not leverage, but start to grow sales, start to save money, because my ultimate was to build a restaurant with seats.
So start in a neighborhood that's a little bit less expensive, that's got a lower lease, that's got a kitchen or already had a restaurant in it. So there's little still build out, because you want to put your own brand and your own spin on it, but there's some structure already in place, and it's takeout only, so you don't have seats. A little bit easier to be a launch pad for you, if you will, before you go into something bigger like this. Is that part of what played into? And it's also changed, isn't that neighborhood? I've been living away from Pittsburgh for many years, but it looks like it has evolved, and there's some new shops on your main street there that you're in. Is that also factor into the equation too?
We saw Millvale as an up-and-coming little town. Grist House is there, Strange Roots is there, Tazadoro is there. There was a lot of really good businesses to join, and there was a lack of food there. So you could go, other than like food trucks and things like that. There's
definitely a void. There was a need there too.
Yeah. We kind of saw it as like there's this great little town with no food in it. So we saw it as a good way to test the brand and make sure that we did have a following. Our pizza was good enough to grow.
Yeah.
And so far we're still busy.
When you open up a brand new business, one of the things that you do as a business owner is experiment. You know, sometimes you have to try new things. Some of them work, some of them don't work. What, besides the dough itself that we had already talked about, what other things in your business have you experimented with, whether it's advertising, whether it's marketing, whether it's social, whether it's your hiring process, your operating process? I mean, are there any things that you, or even other menu items besides the pizza, since we talked about the pizza, but are there things that you have tried and changed and said, hey, you know what, I don't know if this is going to work, but let's just try it. And maybe you're doing that a little bit with the pasta because you haven't done that yet. I'm just curious what role experimentation has played for you and what things maybe you've done in that area.
We're always experimenting. We're always testing things. On the marketing side, about probably a year in, our original logo, I took a friend out for a steak dinner, and he made me this beautiful logo, and it's actually still hanging over there. But eventually we switched to Top Hat Marketing, which is a Millvale-based marketing company.
Okay.
Yes. I'm 32 years old. They're close to our age. They're excited. They're excited to do things and have fun and do things well. So all these steel menus and the steel tie-ins with the Ironborn pizza and the steel pans.
Yeah, your branding's excellent, so
they help
tied in,
tie the whole story together. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We use steel pans. Our menu is steel. Our bar is steel.
Yeah.
Your name
stands out. Your name stands out for sure in the market, for sure.
So we kind of knew we had a story and a brand to go with it, but we wanted to spend a little bit more money to tighten the screws, make it all look cohesive. If you walk into the Millvale location versus this location, they feel different, but they also kind of feel the same.
Right, sure.
So I would say that was our biggest push. They did all our menus.
So your marketing branding was in a way a part of experimenting.
Is the new logo.
Okay.
Now.
So you tried different things. You had something in the beginning and you changed. So that was part of the
we were trying to grow it, and like Burgatory has really good
branding,
cohesive branding.
Yeah,
like I love Burgatory, so I wanted to make it feel like when you walk into an Ironborn, it's like, oh, okay, this feels like Ironborn.
Anything else that you experimented with? Any menu items that you've tried that worked or didn't work or anything like that?
We started out with oysters at Smallman Galley. That did not work.
Did you? Were they on the pizza?
No,
they were just a separate dish.
When I opened at Smallman Galley, I wasn't sure. I mean, just like any business owner in the world, you open a business, you put yourself out there, and you're not sure what's going to happen. So I saw it as, hey, this is my business. We're probably going to be a pizza shop.
Right.
But just in case Pittsburgh doesn't gravitate towards Detroit-style pizza, we could do pasta or
get a backup plan.
Cheeseburger. Right. So I opened with this hilarious menu for a pizza shop, and then 1 week in, we knew that
and then you quickly cut it back, yeah.
So as we changed the menu, the ink didn't even dry.
That's great. That's a great story.
Probably 3 cases of oysters.
That's a great story and a great lesson for anybody listening to this that is starting out too. You know, having a plan B is not a bad idea, but you quickly,
and even if you're confident,
and you learned quickly, and you also adjusted quickly, which is an advantage of a small business.
Yes.
So as we mentioned and we talked about, Detroit style pizza is not as unknown as it used to be. People are becoming aware of it. Even here in Pittsburgh, there are other places that aren't, even though Detroit style pizza isn't the center of what they do, there are places now that are adding it to the menu.
Yes.
How do you approach it differently here at Ironborn Pizza? How do you stand out from the crowd with what you do, and how do you communicate that to the pizza eating public here in town? Is it obviously through your branding, but what other things, how are you setting yourself apart?
It's mainly our ingredients and the care that we take and how we take every bite seriously. You know, we have a lot of respect for our ingredients. We use all organic. The flour is actually from Utah, but it's an all organic flour. We make our own sauces with low sodium tomatoes. We control
so it really
levels.
Has that homemade feel there,
right
then.
And it really is homemade. But to stand out above everybody else, we don't necessarily focus on what other people are doing. We kind of dial it in and put our blinders up
and execute your game and do the best you can do in your business.
Yeah, and even if people would ask, I don't know if I have a great answer for that. I really wish I did. People ask me that all the time. Why is your restaurant so buzzy, or what sets you apart? But I don't know that answer. I'm not sure if I'll ever find out.
A lot of people don't know.
It's a
very
blessing
common.
in
It's a very
disguise.
common because sometimes there's like a secret magic that everything comes together in a certain way that it resonates, and it's just hard to put your finger on it.
If I could bottle that and know what we're doing, that would be great. But I don't know that answer.
What is your role as a business owner and a leader taught you about not only running a business but dealing with people?
Dealing with people is one of the the major parts of restaurant. You can try to make all the great food you want, but then you pack a house and then you lay on all that stress and all that energy, and everybody's stressed out and I'm stressed out. Then it becomes, how do we get through this war over the next 4 hours together and not be upset with each other?
Right.
So there's a lot of different people aspects to it. And then above that, as a business leader, as you grow as a business person, listening to podcasts like this, and then trying to teach your leaders to lead better so that you can focus on things away from the work, which is what we really try to do. Right. So I trust Sarah to run the business when I'm not here, and I back her if that's the case.
Yeah. What thing or things haven't you learned yet that you know you're going to need to learn, or that maybe you want to learn as you grow your business? I'm assuming maybe you want to have another location yet, even beyond this, or even other locations. What things haven't you grown into or learned yet that you know you're going to need to learn?
I would say scalability. In culinary school, you don't learn how to grow a multiple location business, let's call it. I do think we'll need to expand because I have so many heavy hitters back in the kitchen. Financially, that's not going to work out right now. But yeah, I think
having a growth plan and having a way for them to grow with the business is going to help.
Smart scalability based on location in the city and what we think is the best move. But for now, Ironborn Pizza is associated to me like through and through.
And with scalability is the people, the management, the hierarchy. I mean, that's also a big part.
Growing your bench,
putting the right people in the right stores in the right locations so that you have success. And if you have issues, being able to address those issues. For you, your role is going to change, right? Because if you have multiple, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, now you're really managing it in a different way. You're really starting to become a leader, and I imagine you're growing into that role and learning those skills as well. Yeah,
Sarah and I talk about it quite a bit. Growing the bench, who makes sense to run it in a respectful way, who can handle team members that may be disgruntled that day. I don't get too many phone calls that, hey, we had 3 call-offs tonight and everybody's upset. Usually the managers are able to diffuse the situation, make the smart move, and keep making pizza and focus on flavorful things.
What piece of advice would you give to somebody listening to this that wants to start a business or just getting started? What lessons have you learned that you'd like to share?
It's a scary time, but you have to believe in yourself. Be smart about the concept that you're going to open. Is there a gap in the market? Is there a need for it? What's the problem you're solving? And how to do it effectively. We had a business plan ready. We had a general idea of how to make the pizza.
Right.
But you're going to learn a lot that first month, and just try to keep your head up. And
you got to have a plan B.
Keep swimming.
I like that. And have a plan B too, right? You had, even though you didn't need it, it still kind of gave you something.
Right.
It probably gave you something to lean on and didn't feel maybe as risky because you had sort of a backup thought process there too.
We're 2.5 or 3 years in now. We have a good following, but every night I still think about, what if people don't show up tomorrow? I'm not saying that may happen, but opening a business is a terrifying thing, and you just got to work.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Is that you don't lose that jitteriness or the butterflies, and that's probably a good thing. That keeps you on your toes, don't you think? That keeps you hungry for the next day and for what's ahead.
Keep yourself motivated and hungry that you don't have to think about it all the time. That's kind of what we do.
Yeah.
Wake up to work and go for it.
Pete, thanks so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please do me and the Pittsburgh small business community a huge favor by giving it a rating on your favorite podcast app. It really helps others to find the show so that we can continue to build our community. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And if you know someone who should be on the podcast or you'd like to connect with me, you can reach me at proprietorsofpittsburgh.com or at 412-336-8247. I'm Darin Vilano, and this is the Proprietors of Pittsburgh podcast. Take care.